Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies are masterpieces of cinematic craftsmanship. In this video, I'm going to lay out one reason why, using just a single shot, showing how skillfully Jackson manipulates our sense of space and time to convey a huge amount of information with maximum efficiency. The shot I'm going to break down starts here and ends here, and the journey it takes us on is incredible. So Frodo, having been poisoned by the Witch King and descending into delirium, calls out for Gandalf. Gandalf! As he cries out, the image cuts halfway across Middle-earth to Isengard, where Gandalf is imprisoned, and that's where our shot begins. Frodo doesn't know what has happened to Gandalf, but we do, and the filmmakers do, and his cry actually carries sonically across the visual cut to establish where the logic of continuity is coming from. Listen for the echo if you missed it the first time. Gandalf! It's almost as if Frodo's cry reminds us to check in on Gandalf, and Jackson exploits the sound element to make this otherwise abrupt visual transition completely smooth. Our shot begins by placing us just outside the walls of Isengard, and we can see at a glance that Isengard has been militarized, as the walls are now patrolled by armed guards, setting up the much more dramatic changes revealed a moment later, when the camera carries us sailing over the wall. Literally a matter of minutes ago in our film viewing time, Isengard was still green, but they were beginning to rip down the trees, and the landscape seen from above was alarmingly flooded with pinpricks of torchlight. Jackson gives us a dizzyingly paradoxical sense of both how much and how little time has passed. A good chunk of time had to pass for all this work to be done, but we also intuit, reinforced by our sense of viewing time, the frenetic speed at which the work must have been carried out. The sense of acceleration also corresponds to the type of camera movement we're experiencing. In those shots of the orcs felling trees from earlier, the activity was presented by a camera that was either stationary or slowly panning with the toppling trees. Now, the camera is engaged in long, swift tracking motions sweeping through space, and the eye can barely take in all the activity of production. This motion becomes more gentle when we begin to track the moth, which you can see has just entered the frame on the right here, its body cleverly made to stand out against the orange-red glow of the pit. Following it upwards, the camera mimics its rocking, floating motions as we rise into the purer air and isolation of the tower's peak, and find respite from the bustling activity down below. And at last, we are brought back to Gandalf. Exposed to the infinitude of the open sky and elements, but restricted in movement to a tiny platform between the tower's spikes, Gandalf's confinement is a kind of spatial paradox, a paradox intriguingly mirrored by the prison he makes of his hand when he catches the moth, not actually constraining its body, as it has plenty of room to escape. But unlike the moth, Gandalf cannot fly out of his prison, and his inability to fly is exactly what we later realize was at the heart of what he's saying to the moth in another language here, asking it to summon Gwaihir the eagle to rescue him. It's at this point that this lengthy shot finally ends, and we cut to a close-up of the moth. This editing pattern is called a shot reverse shot, and I think it has a really charming effect here, because the most common and familiar use of shot reverse shot is to cut back and forth between two people in dialogue. Here, when one of them is a moth, it both feels novel and drives home the impression that what we're witnessing is a conversation. So, to refresh, we started here, and in these first few frames, you can see where we ultimately end up, the very top of Orthanc, visible in the top left background. And in the space of just under 60 seconds, getting from here to here, without a single word of English dialogue, we take in an enormous amount of information, and both our spatial sense of the world and our temporal sense of the narrative are advanced with unbelievable speed and clarity. I'll leave you with the observation that the other function this moth close-up serves is to re-identify us with Gandalf, as we're now inhabiting his point of view. This helps to set up the following shot that rounds out this grand movement, in which we hop off the ledge with the moth, but like Gandalf, with whom we've now been identified, we can't fly, so we just fall. The frantic acceleration of Isengard kicks in again, and we plunge spiraling down into the fiery depths.